Driver killed in Queens Highway crash identified. The police have identified the taxi driver who was killed in Wednesday's vehicular accident along the Queens Highway in St. Anne as 45-year-old Clint Carty of Old Folly in the parish. The police say they are still trying to ascertain the identities of the two women who were also killed in the incident. Reporters understand that the crash occurred around 11:30 a.m. and reportedly involved a Honda Step Wagon with registration 0702LA and a Mitsubishi motor truck heading in the opposite direction. Reporters have been unable to confirm the details of the incident, but reports suggest that Mitsubishi was in the act of overtaking a line of traffic when the accident occurred. Several people from both vehicles were rushed to hospital, where it later emerged that there were 3 fatalities, including the driver of the Honda Step Wagon. Vice Chairman of the National Road Safety Council, Dr. Lucian Jones, said 222 have died in road crashes since January. While expressing condolences to the relatives and friends of the crash victims, Dr. Jones stressed the need to apply sanctions for breaching road safety regulations in a bid to reduce carnage.
The tragedy which unfolded on the North Coast means that 222 persons have died on the nation's roads. A terrible crash where 3 people died and reportedly 10 were injured. This also means that for the month of July, 34 persons have died, which is the same number for June and for March. But we have to remember that we have another 7 days left in July. And therefore, unless something dramatic happens, we are on track to have the greatest number of persons dying on our roads for 2025 in July, which will be an absolute disaster. And therefore, this brings to mind something which the National Road Safety Council has been advocating for some time, to make sure that all the different elements that make up sanctions are revisited and examined carefully so that we can bring to bear all of these issues in an effort, a national effort, to reduce the carnage on our roads. We have to look again at the breathalyzer system very carefully. We have to see how quickly we can introduce cameras both to detect and to send tickets. We have to look at the merit point system and to see where there's some deficiency and how soon we can fix it. These are things that we have to do urgently in order that we may save lives on our roads, because what is happening is a great tragedy and there's too many lives being lost, precious lives being lost on our roads. We have to act and act swiftly to make sure that people know that sanctions will be applied swiftly and consistently.
Electoral Office urges political parties to verify persons or organizations that donate to their election campaigns. As the election season intensifies, political parties are being urged to verify persons or organizations that donate to their election campaigns. According to the Electoral Commission of Jamaica (ECJ), this is important as the unregulated flow of money into campaigns often has negative consequences. Among these are the risk that those who donate funds will control the election representatives they finance, and the risk that dirty or illicit money will corrupt the system and undermine the rule of law. Speaking at the Electoral Campaign Financial Webinar, Director of Legal Affairs and Compliance at the ECJ, Fenna Daly, said if political parties cannot verify the donors, they should arrange to have the funds transmitted to the Accountant General's Department. She explained that this will be done after the necessary forms are completed and submitted.
Having taken all reasonable steps, and you're still not sure where the funds are coming from, your fourth responsibility as a candidate or a registered political party is to arrange for the funds to be transmitted to the Accountant General's Department. Let me go again. If, as a candidate or a registered political party, you recognize that you're unable to verify the source, make arrangements immediately for the funds to be transmitted to the Accountant General's Department by completing Form 4. Fourth responsibility, complete Form 4 if applicable. So Form 4 is asking you to state the dates. Dates are very important. The value, the name of the candidate or party who received the contribution, and the amounts you're transmitting to the Accountant General's Department. It also requests the signature of the GenSec Secretary, the signature of the secretary, general secretary of the party, or the candidates, and the dates the funds will be transmitted to the accountant general's department, as well as the signature of the person receiving the funds. Form 4, both responsibility, once applicable.
Dad of man in prison and Don get life sentences. 2 men, one a reputed Don from Royal St. Andrew, and the other the father of an incarcerated man, who were convicted for possession of, dealing in and trafficking prohibited weapons and ammunition, were on Monday slapped with multiple life sentences by Supreme Court Judge Justice Von Smith for their crimes. The two, Romario Cunningham and Courtney Roden, were among a group of 4 men rounded up by cops in November 2023 during an intelligence-led operation following a tip indicating that weapons were going to be transported from St. Catherine to a location in St. Andrew on the day in question. Those assigned to the Counter-Terrorism and Organized Crime Investigations Branch of the Jamaica Constabulary Force tracked the Toyota Probox in which Roden, who is in his 60s, was a passenger, to the compound of a hardware store in Mona St. Andrew, where he handed over a bag which was found to contain a semi-automatic rifle with no serial number and a magazine with 21 cartridges to Cunningham and another man who were in a Toyota Noah. After the exchange, a covert team, which had watched and recorded the transaction on camera, gave a signal which resulted in the police teams in unmarked vehicles swooping down and arresting the men and seizing the firearm and ammunition. Following a trial in May, which the case against the 2 men collapsed for lack of evidence, Cunningham, the reputed Don, was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for possession of prohibited weapon, life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 15 years from authorities, possession of ammunition, a life sentence with eligibility of parole after 20 years for dealing in prohibited weapons. Those sentences were ordered to run concurrently, making it so that he will spend at least 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole until after 20 years. Roden, the father of the incarcerated man, who is the owner of the gun which was being taken to the Cunningham, was sentenced to 15 years at hard labor with eligibility for parole after 10 years for the possession of prohibited weapon charge. He was also sentenced to life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 15 years for unauthorized possession of ammunition. He was slapped with a second life sentence with eligibility for parole after 20 years for the charge of trafficking prohibited weapons, and a third life sentence with eligibility for parole after 20 years for dealing in prohibited weapons charge. The sentence will, however, run concurrently, meaning that Roden, who is in his 60s, will serve the longest of the 4 before he is able to apply for parole. The matter was heard in the Gun Court Division of the Home Circuit Court in downtown Kingston over 5 days. A source with knowledge of the case told reporters that Cunningham had set eyes on taking over full leadership of the St. Anne community where he lived, but ruled the fact that no one would take orders from him. So he called for the firearm, which belonged to an incarcerated man, because he intended to extract a vicious takeover. The incarcerated man asked Roden, which is his father, to take the firearm to Papine. That is why the firearm was being exchanged. Cunningham was already a Don, but he wanted more power, firepower, to exact the takeover, the source noted. All 4 men involved in that exchange were arrested the day and charged. However, during the trial, Justice Smith, after considering the evidence, said even though suits had captured the takedown on camera, it wasn't sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the other 2 men were really involved. The 2, who had been on bail, were eventually acquitted. However, Cunningham and Roden were not given bail and were each found guilty and subsequently sentenced. Justice Smith went further to command investigators Detective Sergeant Clayton Ferron of the Counter-Terrorism and Organized Crime Investigations Branch for an investigation well done, outlining that the detective was thorough in putting the evidence on the convicted men together. To subscribe, like, share, and click the notification bell for daily updates.